Hi there, this is Card Bandit, and this is my first video recording for Magic the Gathering Arena. So this is a game that I've been playing a lot lately. It's Magic the Gathering's newest online version. It's currently in closed beta, and it's been in closed beta for a while now. And today I'm not going to go over the basics of the game. I'm sure there's other YouTube videos out there that have gone over that. Instead, I want to go over something specific, and that's a deck that I've been playing in quick Singleton mode, which I believe to be the best deck, or at least one of the best decks. I've played quick Singleton quite a bit now, and I've been twiddling with the deck for a while, and I've gone 7 wins with it several times. So today I'm going to go over the deck, and I'm also going to play it and show you guys how it works. Hopefully you guys enjoy that. So I'm just going to show you the deck first here. Dimir, so it's Dimir, which is blue-black, and it's a control deck. Now, in case you're not aware, Singleton means that you can only have one of every card, which is what I have here. Dimmer being blue-black, so all my cards are black and blue. There's a couple colorless ones, not very many. So let's just go over all the cards in here, why they're in there, and why I think they're good. So Duress is in there because everybody plays planeswalkers or counters or removal or card draw or something that's not a creature. There's no deck out there that is just creatures except for one, and that's the Rats deck. I'll talk about that a bit later, but other than that one deck, Duress is always going to find something good as long as they have, let's say, 3 or more cards in their hand. And if they don't, well, you're probably winning anyway, because spells tend to be more powerful than creatures in most cases. Fatal Push is the best single black removal spell in the game. I think it might just be the best single mana removal period, because while in constructed standard, Magma Spray often is better, in this format, I think Fatal Push, because it can hit higher cost creatures, it allows you to destroy creatures that are converted mana cost 4 or less when you have a permanent that you control leave the battlefield. That extra little ability there makes it just the best removal spell in the game in my mind. Also, when you remove a creature, they don't get anything out of it. Like the card, for example, Settle the Wreckage gives them lands. It also costs 4 mana. So just overall, I think this is the best single mana spot removal, and that's why it's there. Fungal Infection might seem a bit weird because it looks like a pretty weak removal spell, but here's the thing. In this format, a lot of people play extremely powerful 1 toughness creatures. One of them I'm actually playing, and it's Glint Sleeve Siphoner. A turn 2 Glint Sleeve Siphoner, similar to how it works in Standard. If it's unanswered for, let's say, 3 turns, you just lose, because here's the thing, it's if you've played Constructed in the past, if you remember Dark Confidant, this is essentially Dark Confidant's new version, and the amount of cards that they get, let's say they get 2 cards off of it, even if you kill it after they get 2 cards, you've effectively 3-for-1 yourself by removing it, even though it's a 1-for-1 when you actually kill it. The life loss means nothing, and often the energy actually helps them in a lot of energy decks, mine deck being one of them. So Glint Sleeve Siphoner is one of the main reasons that you want Fatal Push, or sorry, well, both of them really, but Fungal Infection. The other one is Bomat Carrier. If you don't know what that is, let me try to find it here. Creature. Turn off these filters here. This guy. So turn 1 Bomat Courier is a real thing. That happens in Standard with mono red and red black aggro, but also there are artifact decks. There's also weird red green decks. There's mono red, and there's also red black in Singleton. And when this gets played turn 1, again, if you can't answer it in, like, let's say 2 turns, you're just dead, because let's say you kill it turn 3 with a spot removal. Let's say turn 3 you finally draw your whatever, cast down or whatever. The thing is, the chances are they've already emptied their hand mostly by then, because they're a very low curve deck. So they would have like maybe 3 cards left in their hand and 3 cards on Bomat Courier. So they'll just sack their hand if it's bad and get 3 cards. So they've already gotten value out of it, plus 3 damage by the time you kill it. Also, the other problem is that by turn 3, let's say you draw another removal spell to deal with Bomat Courier, chances are they've already put like a 2-drop and a 3-drop, if they're curving out, on the board. So now you have to decide, do I want to kill the creature that's actually killing me, like some sort of haste 3-power creature or something, or do I want to kill the 1/1 that's going to draw him a bunch of cards? And it's actually a very tough spot to be put in, because while the immediate life loss from the bigger creature may be more important immediately, when they draw 3 or 4 cards off this thing, you're also just dead, because they draw a ton of cards, and then you have 4 more things to deal with. So this card is insane. It's probably arguably the best card in red aggro currently, at least in Standard. And you need a 1-mana answer, because 2-mana answers against Bomat Courier are just not effective, right? Because like I said, when they're curving out, and say you're on the draw, so if they go turn 1 Bomat Courier, you get hit, you do nothing, you play a land, pass, or whatever, then they play a 2-mana guy and hit you. So now they've got a, let's say the 2/1 haste guy and this guy, and finally on turn 2 you draw your second land untapped, hopefully, if you're lucky, and say you like cast down it, they've already got the 2-power creature on board. This has already done its job, it's got 2 damage in, and they're out-tempoing you because they only spent 1 mana to play their guy, you spent 2 mana to kill it, so you're actually still behind. So that's why it's important to have a 1-mana card against it. Now the good thing about Singleton is that no deck can have more than 1 Bomat Courier, so while at least in my experience, a lot of people tend to have it turn 1, and maybe because I'm unlucky or just my small sample size, but you don't need you don't have to overload on 1-mana answers against this one card in the whole format, right? But still, you want to have something against it. So that's the main reason for Fungal Infection. Also, the third reason is because of this rat card, and I mentioned that a little earlier. So in this format, there is rats, and what do I mean by that? Let me just try to here. No, here he is. Rat Colony. Okay, so this card, which was like a joke card and nobody liked it, and it was this garbage and drafted and sealed when in Dominaria, is actually really good in this format. I actually built a deck up out of just rat colonies after losing to this deck multiple times, and it's pretty good. It catches people by surprise. People aren't ready for it, and when you go turn 2 rat colony, turn 3 rat colony, turn 4 2 rat colonies, that just kills people a lot of times. If they don't have the early removal, if they're like trying to mana ramp, or if they're like drawing cards or doing anything other than killing rat colony, they just die. So this card actually is the perfect answer in black against rat colony, because first of all, it's a 1-mana answer against a 2-mana card, so you're up on tempo. Second, what you're able to do is you kill a rat colony, and then you have another creature. You have a Saproling token to block and kill the other rat colony, because they don't play removal to kill your Saproling. So this thing kills 2 rat colonies for 1 mana. It's just exactly what the deck needs against rat colony. So that's why this is actually a recent change, because I was just so furious with losing to rat colony decks and just like random garbage like. And there's also people that for whatever reason think White Weenie is good, and so they play like 1-drops that are like, you know, Savannah line type cards and stuff, and you just get rushed down by like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop type of deck. And while that's not the most common thing, because yes, they have to have the cards, they have to curve out, you do run into it once in a while, and it's really frustrating. Also, mono red is played a fair bit on Singleton, and there's a 2-mana creature with haste. Let's try to find it here for you. So yeah, this guy, this Kenra guy, he's pretty good. So he kills him. There's also a 3/1 with haste. I thought it cost 2 mana. Let me see here. Maybe I don't own it. That's why it's not coming up. I think it's a common or an uncommon. It's not like that impressive, but oh, maybe it's just a 2/1. Yeah, like guys like this, like these little like you know, pretty dorky dudes, but they come in with haste. They have 1 toughness, and they just do their job of their 2 damage, or you know, if they hit you twice, 4 damage. That's all they're really there for, right? So these guys are just super annoying. There's also Llanowar elves in green decks. Also, there are just, you know, a fair bit of 1 toughness targets for this card. Also, let's say you're playing a control deck, and you might think this card's total garbage. Well, it's not total garbage, because say in a mirror match, or against mono black control, or against Esper, or against any black-based control deck, they play edict type effects a lot of times. I run several in my deck. One of those, the best edict being this one here. So let's say you got your Torrential Gearhulk, or your Scarab God, or whatever. My deck doesn't actually have a lot of creatures, but let's say whatever creature I do have in play is like my big guy, and they play Eldest Reborn. I can actually, in response, Fungal Infection my own guy, make a token, and then they have to, or they don't have to, but I have to sacrifice the token to their edict effect. So that's good too. So it has multiple uses, it's flexible, and at the end of the day, it's a 1-mana removal card that does a lot of things, and if it's ever bad, there's actually ways to pitch it, which I'll show you later, that you can still get value out of having a card. So anyways, that's the reason for Fungal Infection, and that's main deck. It's actually already played. I mean, it shouldn't be a secret to anybody. Fungal Infection is played in sideboard, sometimes even one of's main deck in Esper, and also blue-black control in standard currently. So anyhow, that's the reason behind that card. Now, next card is Brawl Chief of Compliance. This serves 2 functions. First of all, it's a 2-drop. It can block a rat. It can block Bomat Courier. It can block, you know, those little dorky dudes at the start of the game that aggro decks play. Second thing is that it has text on it, and the text is that instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less. This, if you look up here, The orange stuff is non-creature. The blue stuff is creatures. I have very few creatures, a lot of spells. So effectively, it's kind of like a mana ramp card in my deck. But not only does it have the first part, it has a second part, which is whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. So let's say I have a Fungal Infection against a control deck and they didn't play anything early on and I have no use for it, but I have a Brawl Chief of Compliance in play, and I counter them with Censor or Negate or Essence Scatter or whatever. I can then discard my Fungal Infection and get an actual card that I could use. So the looting, it's called looting. Looting effect comes in handy as well. So this guy is a pretty key guy in my deck. Early draw. I have very few creatures anyway, but he does a lot of work. Blink of an eye. So this thing costs 3 instead of 2 when you have Brawl. It draws you a card, and it bounces stuff like Planeswalkers, it bounces artifacts and enchantments you can't deal with. Blue-black, notoriously, just by color pie or by theme of Magic, has issues with enchantments and artifacts, and there actually are quite a few of those which are problematic for this deck. So having that blink option is great. Also, it can be used on your own cards. In particular, like I was talking about earlier, I play one of the most powerful edicts in the game, which is the Eldest Reborn. So one of the most powerful blowouts I can do is turn 5 Eldest Reborn, their big guy, turn 2 to discard a card, turn 3 with the ability on the stack. So the third ability of this card returns target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard and puts it into the battlefield. So let's say I killed their Karn on turn 5, and then I'm taking their Karn. Not only am I taking their Karn, in response to that third ability, I can cast Blink of an Eye on it, returning the Eldest Reborn, and it's doing it again. So now they play Nicol Bolas, or they play Tezzeret, or whatever planeswalker, Liliana. And now I kill their other planeswalker and get their other. This is like you just win the game. Like you take 2 of their planeswalkers and you make them discard and you kill their edict them and stuff. Like that's just too much card advantage, too much tempo. They can't deal with it. They just lose. Like if you ever double that on someone, you pretty much can't lose. So a lot of reasons, but Blink of an Eye is very useful in this deck. Censor, so it's not the best counter in the world, but it is a 2-mana counter that counters any type of spell. A lot of people don't expect it or don't play around it, particularly in Singleton, because first of all, most people don't play Censor. If they do play Censor, they have to draw it. They can only have 1 in their deck. I mean, it's just not worth playing around for most people. And also, if they do play around it, or if, let's say, you draw this late game, you can cycle it for 1 mana and find a different card. So it's just a very flexible, cheap-costed, disruptive spell that does a lot of things. Chart of Course. This is an interesting one. So originally this list didn't have Chart of Course for the last week or so, but recently I made this change. I haven't actually had a chance to cast this very much, but there's a few reasons why this card is in there. First of all, I have a lot of reasons to put things in the graveyard. For example, I have cards that have, well, it's not called Flashback, it's called Aftermath, but there's, for example, this card, Kassan and Oblivion. I have things that want things in the graveyard, like Champion of Wits, to eternalize it. I have effects like, let's see here, Scarab God. Maybe I have a Gear Hulk and I want to like use my mana more effectively to Gear Hulk them or something. I don't know. There could be a reason like that. But the point is that there are some cards in here that have value in the graveyard. A second thing is that it's 2 mana. And the alternative to this card, which I was running, so the card that's replaced, I'll show you it. And you might be surprised by this because most people play the other card in Constructed. Let's see here. No, that's, what am I missing here? Maybe it's, yeah, it's actually a common. Here it is. So I was playing this before, which is actually a pretty good removal spell. It's a 4-mana instant speed divination, so you can tap on the end of their turn and then do something on your turn type of thing, keep counters up. And if you can't cast it for 4, it's 1 mana. But the thing about this deck is that it already has a better 4-mana instant speed removal spell, which is Glimmer of Genius. And there's only so many things you want to hold up at 4. I have Commit to Memory at 4. I have Vraska's Contempt at 4. I have a few spells and creatures to play at 4. And 4 is clunky. 4 is a high cost to pay. Also, Pull from Tomorrow can be played at 4. Sometimes I do play it at 4. Usually I wait till I can draw at least 3, though. Getting 3 off Pull from Tomorrow is obviously better. But the point is that I have other card draw. I don't need it. I have a lot of cycling lands. So that 1 mana, and I play 26 lands too, by the way. So there's 26 lands in this deck. So I don't need like a cycling effect for 1 blue very much. And just the fact that it costs 4 is clunky. The fact that this costs 2 is a big deal. And also because I do have a few low drops, Fungal Infection can be a low drop, kill their 1 drop. turn 2, attack them with the Saproling, draw 2 cards. That's a big game. I mean, that's like huge tempo. 2 mana draw 2 is insane. No drawback if I attack them that turn. So if Brawl gets in there, turn 3 it'll be a 1 mana draw 2 with no drawback. It's just very, very effective. It's a very blowouty card if you have the right draw in the beginning. And that's the reason why I like it over Hieroglyphic Elimination. Essence Scatter, just the most effective hard counter at 2 mana for creatures. There's not much more to say to it than that. It's been around for a while. It used to be called something else. I think it was Remove Soul, but it's the same thing. It's been around since the beginning of Magic. It's always been decent, and in this format particularly, people like to play a lot of decks, mid-range control decks, have like their big Durley guy, their angels, their dragons, whatever, and being able to prevent it from going to play for 2 mana is pretty awesome. Negate, there's tons of planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, like I was talking about earlier, also other control decks. A lot of them play similar counters to me, so being able to stop them for 2 mana is amazing and great. Search for Azcanta. So if you're familiar with Standard, this should be no surprise, but it's a very efficient and useful card draw engine. So, I mean, there's two reasons why this is good. First of all, it only costs 2 mana, so it's cheap to get down. Second thing is that once you flip it, if you read it here, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, you reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. And because my deck is so low on creatures, it's able to find most of the deck and find the answers I need. So late game is just digging answers, and if I activate that a few times, just the card advantage off of that typically is enough to swing the game. Third reason is that it turns into a land, and sometimes you just need to hit that 6th or 7th land to tap out to do something powerful, and it gives you that ability. And then also the fact that in order to flip it, you have to have 7 cards in your graveyard. There's a lot of things like I was talking about earlier that are good to have in my graveyard, right? There's Aftermath cards, there's Eternalize cards, there's Champion of Wits, for example. And there's also some cards that just aren't effective in all matchups against control decks. Spot removal is not that great, etc. Say I'm against an aggro deck, I don't really want Commit to Memory, for example. It doesn't really do anything against them, so like I'd probably pitch that. So there's a lot of things like that that I'd have no problem putting in my graveyard. Also, if I have a ton of lands already, I'm getting flooded, and there's another land on top, I can. It's almost like drawing a card if in that situation to put that in your graveyard. So it's just a very, very efficient, good engine for control decks that play a lot of non-creatures. Cast Down is the most efficient 2 mana spot removal. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit legendaries, and a lot of people play legendaries in this format. There's just a lot of legendaries. So this is actually not as good as it seems, but it's still a necessary card against aggro, mid-range, your elves and your goblins or whatever. Dorky dudes that they play, utility creatures, and it gets the job done. Glincy Siphoner, I kind of went over this already. It's effectively Dark Confident, arguably better in this deck because I actually have a use for energy. I have ways to generate energy, and the most you can lose is 1 life. So it's actually a better Dark Confidant in this deck anyway. Also, it has Menace. Dark Confidant didn't have Menace, so I would say it's like an upgraded Dark Confidant for control decks. It's pretty awesome. It also is a blowout. If you turn 2 this in a control match and they can't answer it, you just win the game. So there's that as well. Consigned to Oblivion. This is the second bounce spell, the only other bounce spell. Again, same reason as the previous one, Blink to an Eye. It can effectively answer, or at least temporarily answer, all types of permanents, including planeswalkers. What's great is that you can use as the end of the turn bounce or planeswalker if they only have 1 card in their hand, and then cast Oblivion, making them discard their last 2 cards. So the Oblivion part of it actually has use against pretty well all decks. You can bounce creatures and then effectively remove it by making them discard 2. So also, this is a card that if you mill through Search for Azcanta isn't useless. You can still do the 5 mana Mind Rot, which is quite useful, and especially in slow matches. Treasure Map. So this is the one card that I'm still kind of debating because this was a toss-up between this card and this card. Nope, I'm pretty sure it's a rare. It's an enchantment. There we are. So this one. So there's either this card. For a while I was running both, but I found that running Treasure Map, Search for Azcanta, and Arguable Bloodfast, and Glincy Siphoner, which is basically all the 2 mana draw engines for blue-black, made your deck just too dirtily and slow against curve-out aggro decks. Like, if you're turn 2 arguing and they've already got 2 guys in play and they're Bullmat Couriering you, and then turn 3 they're like, I don't know, Chain Whirlering you and just beating you down, this is like a dead card that does nothing. It's actually worse than nothing because you can never activate it. And you know, in unlike constructed and standard where you can play many of say this, or not many, but at least two, let's say, two Scarab Gods, or maybe even three Scarab Gods. This card's pretty great with Scarab God because it's kind of a mini combo here. Once you flip it, you can sack your Scarab God returns to your hand at the end of turn, and you gain 5 life, and you just keep doing that and grind them out after getting down to 5 once you have control of the game, and just kind of lock them up that way. You can only have one Scarab God, so like having the combo for the one card just isn't all that great. I don't have high toughness creatures very much. The ones I do have, like, you know, turn 2 brawls, 3 toughness, okay, great. So maybe turn 12 I can gain 3 life. I mean, it's just not very good. Like, it just doesn't do enough. And two mana draw 2, or it's not even draw 2, it's draw 1. So 2 mana to draw 1 just is horrible against any aggro deck when you're behind. So while it is amazing in control matches, similar to, it's actually, yeah, I would say better than both Search for Azcanta and Treasure Map in terms of payoff against the control deck. Because the meta is so diverse, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have this. If the meta switches up to like a lot of more blue-black, a lot more mirrors, a lot more control and combo, like control and combo, and that's all you're facing, and everybody gave up on aggro, then sure, that's when this can come in and like be just a game breaker. But until that day happens, which I think will probably be never, there's always gonna be that one guy who's like, yeah, let's play mono red, because it's so easy, and I just stomp people, and people love it for some reason. It also wins a lot, so. Anyway, so that's my argument against Argyle and why I play Treasure Map. Treasure Map, while it doesn't have the immediate card advantage draw ability of Argyle's Bloodfast, late game Scry 1 is almost like drawing a card. Second is that once you do flip it, you make 3 treasure artifact tokens, and you can sacrifice each one to draw a card using Treasure Cove. So it effectively gets 3 cards for the cost of 1 card, which is a 3-for-1, which is great, which is card advantage. Sometimes you need that mana too. Sometimes those treasures on, you know, turn 7 or whatever, you just need the extra mana to do some big plays. Like, you know, maybe you want to do Oblivion plus play a Planeswalker, or maybe you want to play like Champion of Wits and keep up a counter. Like, there's things like that you can do by having those treasures. So this is by no means like that much worse than Argyle's. It is though worse in a control match, but it is not that much worse. Champion of Wits. So this card is great. 3 mana 2/1 to draw 2, discard 2 isn't great. That part isn't the great part. Like, that's just like kind of whatever. You wouldn't play it if that was all it did. The Eternalize what makes it good, because once you get this in your graveyard, which isn't too hard to do, you can trade it off or just chump, or you can discard it with another effect. And then for 7 mana, you get a 4/4. And so that 4/4 draws you 4 cards and discards 2. So now you're up on cards because you're drawing 4, discarding 2. You're up 2. Also, you have a 4/4 in play. And that's a big deal because this deck plays a lot of conditional stuff like Censor. That's only really good on turn 2. It's playing stuff like Treasure Map, which is not the greatest thing late game. It's playing stuff like, you know, board wipes. Things that are good situationally, a lot of these cards, but not always good. So you're able to throw them away and get cards that are actually good for you, and have a 4/4. So it just does everything that you want. Late game, it's just a way to tie up the game through card advantage. Also, hey, sometimes you just need like a guy to block on turn 3. So it's just never really that bad of a card. Disallow, it's the best 3 mana hard counter because it's able to counter both spells. So it's cancel with upside. It has the clause of activated ability or triggered ability, which does come up. For example, you may want to counter your opponent's Champion of Wits Eternalize effect. You can do that. You may want to counter them from flipping their Nicol Bolas, which is like a big problem for this deck if that ever happens. You can do that. Sometimes that you somehow got your best planeswalker or creature in your graveyard, and you're facing down an Eldritch Reborn that's about to hit the 3rd level and take your Scarab God or something, which would just kill you. You're able to counter that. So it's like all these things that it can do. So it's just so versatile and so powerful. And that's why it's there. Supreme Will, not quite as versatile, but it's good because it only costs 1 blue instead of 2, and this is a 2-color deck, so sometimes you don't have 2 double blue on turn 3 a fair amount of the time, so it's still able to be used most of the time. Also, late game, when they don't have a spell worth countering, or maybe they have the 3 mana to pay, you can just use it to dig up a card. So it's never a dead card. It's a very versatile card. It's not the most powerful card, but it's flexible, it fits the curve, and it does what you want it to do. Lonto's Last Reckoning. Unfortunately, in Standard, unlike older formats that some people might be familiar with, cards like Damnation, etc., which are just way better. I mean, I wish there was Damnation, but unfortunately, we got to deal with what we got, and this is the best board wipe unconditional that Black has access to. So why is it not that great? Well, 3 mana to kill all creatures is pretty awesome, but the issue is that you can't untap your lands, and that's a big deal because this deck is often tapping out every single turn. So this is kind of like a last resort type of card where you need that board wipe. Your opponent just emptied his hand and just dumped all his crap on the board, and like it's the only thing that'll save you type of card. And it does have its uses. Doomfall, again, versatile. It's kind of a similar type of card to Supreme Will. It's a disruptive card. It has 2 uses. One is like a duress type ability, except it can hit not just non-creatures, but any spell. And also exiles it, which matters because there's things with Eternalize or with Aftermath that you might not want to deal with. Also, it can exile their one guy. So if they got, like, if they tapped out turn 5 for their god, well, you can exile their god. So that's good. So coming down here, so that's about halfway through the cards so far, roughly. Alright, so Never and Return. Never is the main part. So destroy target creature or planeswalker. So it's effectively murder at sorcery speed, but it can make planeswalkers, which is good. Like I say, there's a lot of planeswalkers, a lot of decks, even random mid-range decks play stuff like Karn and play stuff like, any red deck is going to play, what's her name? Chandra and stuff like that. You just need to deal with those cards. It's destroy, it's not exile, so it won't deal with, for example, gods or indestructible creatures or hexproof creatures. But it hits enough things, and also, again, this deck has the self-milling part, the discarding part. The return thing does come up. Sometimes there's a creature or a land or whatever in their graveyard that you want to take out. You can do that as well and give you a 2/2 zombie in return. So it just overall does everything you want out of a removal spell. All right, Vilna's Hunger. This is a rare. This is also a recent addition. For a while, I was contemplating playing Murder in this spot, or I was just trying to find like a better type of removal spell. But I found that this is actually the best one because, first of all, it costs 1 black instead of double black, which Murder. Just in case you're someone who doesn't know what Murder is. Instant right here. Alright, so that's Murder. Destroy target creature, 3 mana. It's a clean removal spell for creatures. So why is this better? Well, first of all, it's like I said, 1 black. Now the second thing is that it can hit things that are untargetable, and there are things that are untargetable in this format. For example, there is the hexproof green 4 mana creature. Let me show you what that one is. And pretty much all the green decks do play them. What did I miss here? It's an uncommon, it's a creature. Okay, Vinemare. So it can kill a Vinemare. Also, the other part of the text actually does come up. So Ascend. So once you have 10 permanents, which is often happening in late game, especially if you flipped your treasure map or whatever, you're able to semi-wipe them. So if they have it's particularly good if your opponent has an uneven number of creatures because they have to sacrifice the creatures rounded up. So if they have 3 creatures and you play this, they must sack 2. Typically that's the 2 worst ones, but still, that's. I mean, nobody's playing bad creatures per se. This isn't a draft. This is a constructed format, so you're killing 2 good creatures still. If they have 5, you kill 3. It does a lot of things, and it's instant speed. It's just a good effect to have, and overall better than Murder in my mind. Commit to Memory, a little bit dirtily in the sense that it's expensive cost. It costs 4 mana, but it's versatile. Once again, just like the bounce spells, it can deal with artifacts, any type of permanent. I mean, if you have to, late game, you can commit whatever they have in play and then Memory to shuffle it away. Hopefully they don't draw it for a while. I mean, that's something you could do. It's more of an act of desperation because when you do that, your opponent draws 7 cards as well, which is not good for you, usually. So the Memory part, you don't use too often. I've only used it maybe like once or twice, but the commit part is just versatile enough, instant speed, cost 3 with Brawl, etc. So it does enough things that it's worth having. Glimmer of Genius I mentioned before. It's the best 4-mana instant speed draw spell in blue. The fact that you scry 2 is the reason. You scry 2, then draw 2, which is more like drawing 3 or 4 depending on the situation, because late game, say you see 2 lands on top, get rid of those 2 lands, draw the next 2 cards, which are non-lands. Well, that's almost like you drew 4, right? Also, that energy, like I showed with the 2-drop creature over here, Goonsleeve Siphoner does matter, because if you have energy, you can instantly draw the next turn off Siphoner instead of waiting after attacking. So it's just overall very useful, synergistic, and powerful for this deck at 4 mana. Gonti. So Gonti is an interesting card. It's played in Standard a fair bit. He's in there because, first of all, he has Death Touch, and he's a creature, so he's able to trade of any ground creature, including hexproof creatures, big creatures, whatever, as long as they're not Ronus or something. Second thing is that the looking at your opponent's top 4 cards and exiling one is a pretty big game, because this is a Singleton format. So if you take out their Karn or their Teferi or anything like that, you know that they don't have anymore, and they're never going to get any more. So it's like it's almost like an Ixalan's binding on it. Like they can't possibly have it anymore. With the exception, of course, of the rats, but we'll pretend those don't exist for a minute here. So it's able to permanently deal with something in their deck. Second, most control decks are playing very powerful cards. A lot of them are playing similar cards to mine. Like other people are playing stuff like Liliana, and people are playing like Scarab Gods, Eldless Reborns, Never Returns, whatever. Actually, Never Returns a bad example, because it goes into their graveyard after you use it, I believe. Yeah, it does. So then they get their return. So you wouldn't want to take that specifically, but any kind of powerful card to take their Karn. I don't actually run Karn in my deck, which is something I originally did run, but I found it to not actually be that great. I'd rather have an immediate board answer, which is Gonti. Gonti, like I say, it can trade off of ground creatures, and that actually matters when you're facing a aggro or a mid-range deck. You need to have stuff to deal with their stuff. You can't just sit around drawing and durdling for like turn 1 to turn 5, because then you're just dead. Like then you just turn 5, play Eldritch Reborn, that you lose, you kill their Llanowar Elf, and then you just die. Like that's what happens. So you need to have something. So Ravenous Chupacabra. So I used to have Noxus Gearhulk in here and not Ravenous Chupacabra, but the thing is, again, in aggro and mid-range matches, you just need a cheaper removal spell. You can't just wait till turn 6 and play a Gearhulk and expect to like stabilize the board. This is not how the game works. You need to deal with like their 2, 3, 4, 5 mana cards more efficiently, which this does. Vraska's Contempt, very, very powerful removal spell. Yes, it does cost 4, which is expensive. It's more than murder, but you gain the 2 life, so the tempo loss of killing a cheaper costed creature is somewhat negated by gaining that 2 life. Also, it exiles the target, so if things can't be flashed back, or rather eternalized or what have you. Also, it deals with planeswalkers at instant speed, which is a pretty big deal. When you kill their Nicol Bolas or their Karn or their Teferi, that's a big game. So you need answers to those type of cards as well. So this is the final board wipe type effect, Yahini's Expertise. So there's several slots that kind of compete for the conditional board wipe in black. There's this card. I think it might be in my sideboard actually. There is this one, Rags to Riches. And then there's also the 3 mana, I believe it's an uncommon effect. Let's see here. Golden Demise. Okay, so there's Golden Demise, -2/-2, and if you have Ascend, it only does -2/-2 to them. Rags to Riches, 4 mana, -2/-2 to all creatures. However, it has the Riches part, which is actually pretty great in a control match, because you get to steal their best guy, which is often like a Sphinx, or because it doesn't even target, so you don't have to. You can take the untargetable Sphinx of Lost Truths, or I can't remember what it's called. Let me try to find what I'm talking about here, because I'm sure there's some viewers that don't have every single card memorized. Let's see. Creature, costs 5, it's a rare. This guy. So this guy, Glyph Keeper. Sphinx of Lost Truths is a completely different card. Glyph Keeper, which has the ability of the first spell to target it gets countered. So that's a big problem when you're playing spell removal, obviously. So this can take that. So Rags and Riches was a close one. Like I kind of wanted this card instead, but the problem is that -2/-2 doesn't deal with a lot of things. There's a lot of 3 toughness things that you just can't kill. And the whole point of a board wipe is to wipe the board. And if you're not wiping the board, why are you running it, right? So and there's not, just because it has an upside of a of a potential 7 mana control magic isn't enough reason to not play a card that can actually wipe them. So -3/-3 and -2/-2 is a big enough difference there that this is better. Second thing is the other part of the text, which is play a 3 mana cost or less card from your hand at no cost, is great. I mean, that's a huge tempo boon. I mean, when you do something like a Yahini's Expertise, and let's say one other creature's was 4th toughness, but hey, you're holding a fungal infection, so now you get the -1/-1 and wipe their whole board. Or maybe you late game drew like a treasure map or a Champion of Wits on turn 4, and you need to wipe them. You get to play both, right? So being able to do all the things on turn 4, it's just a really great use of mana, and it's a super way to come back into the game when you're behind. Hostage Taker. I like this better than Gearhulk again because it costs less. It costs 4. It's kind of like this card, except if they kill your Hostage Taker before you play whatever thing you killed, they get their card back, which is bad. So it's a little bit more risky to play on turn 4. However, sometimes you just need to play it and take that risk because otherwise you die. So in that case, you would do it all day. Also, late game, this is way better because you get to, for example, a Hostage Taker, their creature, and then play it immediately. Say they have a Gonti on turn 8 or 7 if you have Mana Excel off of the treasure map, for example. You can Hostage Taker their Gonti, play their Gonti, and it's just such a huge blowout because now they can't get Hostage Taker. The thing is, once Hostage Taker enters the battlefield and exiles their creature, so when the effect is resolved, in other words, they can't actually respond. They can't, like, they don't have the player doesn't have priority until you get to do it first. So there's no way for them to stop it if you have 8 mana, basically, except they can maybe counter, I guess, the Gonti, but then they're countering their own card. That's still good, right? So very good card. Liliana's Death's Majesty. Again, this is a self-milling effect, which has synergy with the deck. It allows you to return very powerful creatures. It doesn't run very many, but the creatures that this deck does run are very powerful. Bringing back a Hostage Taker for 0 mana, that's a big game. Bringing back a Scarab God, bringing back a Torrential Gearhulk, like these are all powerful things. Bring back Gonti, bring back Ravenous Chupacabra. Any of those things is a pretty big blowout. Also, the +1 effect will eventually kill them. I mean, you keep making 2/2s, eventually it just overruns them. I've never yet in Singleton gotten to -7 on Liliana, but if you do, yeah, it's a conditional board wipe, which might matter in some situations. I have yet to find that situation, but hey, it's still something, right? It just does all the things pretty well, and it's something that your opponent can't just really ignore for too long. Eventually, it does overtake the game. I was going to talk about that already, the Best Edict effect at 5, and it has 2 other relevant modes, and it's reusable with my 2 bounce effects. It just does so much. A very, very powerful card. Scarab God, it's, well, at one point considered the best card in Standard. I don't necessarily think this is the case now, but it's probably the most powerful card in blue-black at 5 mana. I think that's not very arguable. So, I mean, Scarab God, it's, it's got a bunch of text on it, and then the biggest part of it is, first of all, when he dies, returns to your hand. So cards like Murder just don't really do anything because he just goes back to your hand, you play it again. Eventually, they're going to run out of cards like Murder to cast, and he sticks. And also the other part, if you have the mana to activate his ability, which is to exile a target creature card from a graveyard, any graveyard, and create a copy of it. If you do that once or even twice, that's kind of just game over because you get the 4/4s that now are helping you scry. Your opponent loses life. It's a 4/4, which is a pretty big creature. It just does everything. So this is actually one of the best win conditions in this deck. This deck doesn't have a ton of win conditions. This is definitely one of them. One of the better ones. Torrential Gearhulk. Not quite Snapcaster, but it's the best thing you get in Standard. So 6 mana flash, 5/6 artifact creature that lets me cast whatever instant card in my graveyard. So a lot of times this is going to be used on turn 6 if I have a counter, like a hard counter, an Essence Scatter, or a Negate. It can be used also for card draw off Glimmer. It can be used for an Edict effect off Vona's Hunger. It can be used with Disallowed. Sometimes I just need to draw more cards. That's not usually the use, but it can do that. Blink of an Eye, even. I mean, you can do actually, no, that doesn't make a lot. I was going to say you could use it, block, and then blink your guy back, but it doesn't actually work that way because you have to cast a card immediately, so never mind. But the point is that there's a lot of powerful instants in this deck. Cast Down's another one that it allows you to cast for free. Syncopate, another conditional counter disruption spell that is great because it can be used any turn after turn 2 Obviously, late game countering a low cost card doesn't work very well, which is usually about when you want to just cycle it, but with your other cards. But the fact that it exiles the spell that they're casting is relevant. When, for example, they could have a Glyph Keeper, and being able to exile a Glyph Keeper is pretty awesome. And also it can be used on turn 2. And there's not that many counters that are any good that can be used on turn 2. This deck is basically playing all of them, so this is one of those. Pull from Tomorrow, pretty amazing card if you can cast this for 3 or more. Obviously for 5, 6, or 7, it just wins the game usually. It's a huge card draw effect. It's kind of like Sphinx's Revelation, if you're familiar with that card. The discard part of it in this deck doesn't mean very much. I mean, losing a land or losing a useless card that doesn't have any use past that turn is perfectly fine. Like it's not even really a cost. So yeah, a very powerful card draw. Now the lands, there's 26 of them, there should be. So 7 islands and 6 swamps. Reason is 16 blue cards, 15 black cards, 47, 44. It's pretty close, but slightly more blue heavy. So having that extra island is better. And then for the non-basics, Desert of the Mindful, cycles. This one's actually probably the least good land in here, because the target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. It doesn't come up very often except with commit to memory. So when you commit them, you put their card into the top of their deck, and then you can memory it to make them discard it. So that sometimes comes up, but it's, the fact is that it comes into play untapped, so it can be used right away. And or sorry, I'm talking about the wrong card here. Here we go. Ipnu Reveler. You can use it right away, which is important, and it has some use later in the game in some situations. Islands are self-explanatory. Memory to Genius, another utility card, gets you cards. 5 mana sack at late game, gets you 2 cards. That can sometimes be the difference that you need. A cycling black land. Deadlands, again, it's pretty great. You can sack a desert, which there's a few of in this deck, to kill their guy. Bring back your, maybe you milled something you didn't want to mill, or maybe something got killed somehow, like Hostage Taker or Ravenous Chupacabra or Gonti, Scarab God, Torrential Garruk, etc. So being able to get one of your powerful creatures back late game is pretty big deal. Drowned Catacomb, you're running all the blue-black lands because you need the mana fixing. So even the worst one, which is the common one, comes into play tapped from M19. It's just a necessary evil. You need to have your mana. This deck plays a lot of double blue, double black type stuff. So if you look here, a fair bit of double blue, double black, especially after turn 3. So you need to have access to all your colors, and dual lands are how you do that. Feeded Pools being one of the better ones because you can cycle it late game, and this one coming into play untapped. As long as you have an island or a swamp, is pretty great as well. So these are better ones, obviously. They're also rare. Aether Hub, again, it gives you both blue and black, comes to play untapped, and it has synergy with the other energy cards that I already went over. Arc of Orazca is a card draw effect. It's basically like Memorial to Genius, but one less card. You just don't have to sacrifice it. So it's kind of like a better Memorial to Genius, but it's colorless. Evolving Wilds plays the role of a dual land, the 4th one, to give you your mana colors. And Field of Ruin, mainly this is used against your opponent's flipped Search for Azcanta or flipped Blood Ritual, the other one I went over. So that's the deck. Actually, I'm curious if there's actually 26. They made some changes lately. Let's make sure there's still 26 lands here. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 19, 20, 23, 24... Yeah, so there's 26 lands, which is exactly what I want in this deck. So there you go. So that's the deck. Also, I just wanted to talk about this card a little bit more. This was actually just until today in this deck, because this is a great finisher. But I found this deck just doesn't really need the finishers, and even though this is one of the better ones, I find that matches like Azorius Control and Esper Control, my deck is pretty well suited for the late game against them as is. And because they're running a lot of dead cards against me, like board wipes are not very effective, etc., that I feel I don't need the value that this provides in terms of a finisher. I'd rather just run more disruptive cards that help my other matches. But still, like, this would be a great card to have. And maybe you don't have all the cards. Maybe you're trying to play a list like mine, and you're trying to think of, like, a threat to put in your deck that, maybe you haven't got access to all the cards. This would be one of the best ones. Probably the next card that I'd consider in this deck would be this one. So, for now, it's not in there. which means I have maybe a little bit, takes a little longer to close out games in control matches, but I'm okay with you know, taking my time. So okay, so we're gonna jump in here and play a game. But I'm going to stop recording though, just to make sure this video actually recorded properly. So let me just go ahead and do that first.